Mahinda Rajapaksa flees the Sri Lankan Prime Minister's residence with family. Rajapaksa takes refuge at a Sri Lankan Navy base. Angry protesters bring down the statue of D.N. Rajapaksa as anger spirals out of control. The army is called out, shoot at sight orders issued. More than 40 homes of ruling party leaders set ablaze. Island on fire is our top focus on India First. As of now, there are shoot-at-sight orders issued in Sri Lanka by the Ministry of Defence, giving the army emergency powers to shoot to stop looting, arson and violence. More than 40 homes of ministers, ex-ministers, members of parliament and other political leaders have been set on fire overnight in this violence. But will shoot-at-sight orders bring the situation under control? We will get you the latest from the island nation on fire. I'm Gaurav Sawant. As always, let's get started with the headlines on India First. Supreme Court asks the centre to clear stand on sedition law by tomorrow. Top court wants to know if the law can be kept in abeyance for pending and future cases. This after the Narendra Modi government said it will re-examine the colonial era law. Khalistan linked to the RPG attack on Punjab Police Intelligence Headquarters emerges. SFJ Chief Gurpatwant Singh Pannu issues an open threat, warning of attacks in Himachal Pradesh next. Some Hindu groups demand Qutub Minar be renamed as Vishnu Stambh. The BJP wants Mughal era names of roads in the capital to be purged. Loudspeaker showdown in Karnataka escalates. The Basavaraj Bommai government sets a 15-day deadline for religious places to comply with the noise limits. Kashmir Files maker Vivek Agnihotri hits back at senior Congress leader Shashi Tharoor for allegedly mocking the genocide of Kashmiri Hindus. Reminds him that his late wife Sunanda Pushkar was also a Kashmiri Pandit. Sri Lanka is descending deeper into chaos. The government in the island nation has now issued shoot-at-sight orders to quell protests, violence, arson and looting. Mahinda Rajapaksa and his family were forced to be evacuated by the army in a military helicopter when the outer periphery of the Prime Minister's residence was broken by protesters. The situation remains extremely grim. We bring you our top story from Sri Lanka.
Lanka is in flames. Violent protests rocking the picturesque island nation. Super luxury cars vandalized and burnt in arson attacks. Plush residences of top politicians set on fire in unprecedented display of public fury. The Indian Ocean nation, grappling with its worst ever economic crisis, is now on the brink of a full-blown civil war. Homes of several sitting and former ministers, members of parliament and mayors have been set on fire by protesters, angry over economic hardship, chronic shortage of essential items and runaway inflation. The house of Sri Lanka's former Prime Minister, Mahinda Rajapaksa, who resigned on Monday, was also set ablaze. Protests were staged over acute shortages of fuel and electricity, along with skyrocketing prices of essential commodities. Dramatic images of chopper reportedly evacuating members of ruling party from a stadium surfaced. Former Prime Minister Rajapaksa too left his official residence Temple Trees early on Tuesday after military cleared out protesters. The government imposed a nationwide curfew till Wednesday. Anti-government protesters lined up the streets leading to the international airport to block any ministers leaving the country. Speaking to India Today exclusively, former Sri Lankan cabinet minister and cricket captain Arjun Ranatunga blamed the Rajapaksas.
They allowed them to walk towards them. I think it was a highly planned thing, and I blame the police, I blame the forces. They should have easily stopped this thing. This entire thing was planned by most probably the government, but supported by the police and the forces as well.
At least 7 people, including an MP, have died in the flare-up and hundreds have been injured. With Ruxana Rizvi in Colombo and Ashutosh Mishra in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
So former Sri Lanka minister and cricket captain Arjun Ranatunga, he spoke exclusively to India Today's Ashutosh Mishra on the ongoing crisis. Now Arjun Ranatunga blames the Rajapaksa government for this, not just the economic crisis, but the situation that's deteriorating with each passing hour in the country. Let's listen in.
What is the situation that you are seeing in Colombo, in the island country?
I think it was a highly unwanted situation created by the Prime Minister who resigned yesterday. These protesters, these peaceful protesters have been protesting for almost 1 month without any violence. I think we all like the way they handle things. And unfortunately, last morning, President has invited some of his party supporters, MPs, ministers, and there were a fairly big crowd came to the Temple Trees, that is the Prime Minister's office and the home, and they started talking about it. And unfortunately, it came to a stage where they were provoked by some of the ministers, even the Prime Minister, and that is where the incident started. These people who were supposed to be after alcohol went towards almost like a kilometer, maybe 1.5 kilometers from the Temple Trees to the protest area, that is at the golf face, and they started attacking the innocent people, innocent protesters. And they started attacking the ladies, the priests, the people who were innocently protesting. They started attacking. That is where the entire country walked into the roads and started this particular issue. Ultimately, the president, after that, he left, but he left, put fire into the entire country. I think he and the ministers who provoked these people should take the blame on this issue.
Mr. Ranatunga, I would recall that in the last month when I visited Colombo, in the interview you had anticipated there could be some foul play, some mischief by the state actors or the non-state actors where they could disrupt the peaceful protest. Now, do you see it was a design, it was done by at the behest of the government, or you see it was the spontaneous reaction, the clashes between supporters and the protesters?
No, it was properly planned. I think the president has requested the Prime Minister to step down last afternoon. Before that, he got his supporters, who are the provincial council, town council, MPs, who were government loyalty politicians. And they were the ones who came into this particular meeting. And from there, they created them to go into the protest area. Even some of the ministers walked into the protest area. That is why it didn't go right. I think this is where this entire issue started. When the president wanted the Prime Minister to step down, Prime Minister brought his most of the supporters and asked them whether he should resign. Then everyone said not to resign. So it was all planned things, organized by some of the ministers who has ruined this country, and started provoking them to go into the unwanted area. And I'll tell you something else. I blame the police and the forces for that as well. They could have easily stopped them coming into the protest area. We have seen a lot of protests happening near the parliament. They started attacking water guns, and even tear gas was attacked. But this particular thing, they allowed them to walk towards them. I think it was a highly planned thing, and I blame the police, I blame the forces. They should have easily stopped this thing. This entire thing was planned by most probably the government, but supported by the police and the forces as well.
And under intense pressure, Mahinda Rajapaksa quit as Prime Minister, but the protests have only intensified. Some protesters close to the Rajapaksa family or the party are alleged to have beaten up protesters and set their tents on fire. And this, as you heard Arjun Ranatunga there, led to a huge backlash. Multiple homes were set on fire, so much so that Mahinda Rajapaksa had to be evacuated by air and taken to a Sri Lankan naval base at Trincomalee. As protests escalated across Sri Lanka, Mahinda Rajapaksa and his family fled the Prime Minister's official residence in a military helicopter and were forced to take refuge at a Sri Lankan naval base at Trincomalee. But protesters reached the Sri Lanka Navy base and protests raged through the day despite Rajapaksa submitting his resignation as Prime Minister of Sri Lanka on Monday. Overnight protests resulted in more than 40 homes of political leaders associated with the ruling dispensation being torched in Sri Lanka. The ancestral home of the Rajapaksa family was also set on fire by protesters up in arms over the country's worst economic crisis since its birth in 1948.
I think it was a highly unwanted situation created by the Prime Minister who resigned yesterday. These protesters, these peaceful protesters have been protesting for almost 1 month without any violence. I think he and the ministers who provoked these people should take the blame on this issue.
Not satisfied with torching homes, shops and offices of ruling party members and supporters, protesters also brought down the statue of D.A. Rajapaksa, father of the Rajapaksa brothers, insisting on the resignation now of the Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
Everyone who is involved in this government, including President Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Rajapaksa, must be held responsible for this inhumane attack. This was a planned attack. This was a thought-out project. This was an act of state terrorism and political terrorism. The Rajapaksas must be held responsible for this.
The Sri Lankan army has now been called out to restore law and order, and shoot-at-sight orders have been issued to ensure that the situation does not spiral out of control after a day of arson and violence.
भारत क्योंकि पड़ोसी देश है श्रीलंका का, भारत चाहता है वहां पर शांति हो, सौहार्दपूर्ण सभी कुछ हो और जो उनका मसला है ठीक से सुलझ जाए। तो हम उम्मीद तो यही करेंगे जो वहां पर गृह युद्ध नहीं होता है, क्योंकि अगर गृह युद्ध होता है तो भारत के लिए भी बहुत बड़ी चिंता बन जाएगी।
New Delhi is watching the situation closely, and the Ministry of External Affairs issued a statement saying, as a close neighbor of Sri Lanka with historical ties, India is fully supportive of its democracy, stability and economic recovery. India has extended this year alone support of $3.5 billion. Despite shoot-at-sight orders and emergency powers given to the army and the police to restore law and order, Sri Lanka totters on the brink of a bloody civil war. Bureau Report, India Today. So is Sri Lanka actually on the brink of civil war? Joining me on India First, Indrajit Samara Rajiva, a writer and commentator from Colombo. Also with me on the broadcast is Ishwaran Ratnam, a senior journalist. And Mr. Ratnam, if I could ask you first, How bad is the situation on ground right now? What impact has the shoot at site orders had on the protesters, sir?
Well, there haven't been any shooting incidents reported as yet since this order was issued. But there are some tensions taking place in Negombo as we speak. This is just outside Colombo, close to the main airport. And there are mobs also in other parts of the country. So it's a very tense situation. People are expecting things to flare up overnight. And we've seen the curfew, which was imposed yesterday, being extended till Thursday. It was to be lifted tomorrow, but it has been extended till Thursday. So we are expecting more violent incidents over the next few hours.
Okay. Mr. Samarajiva, is there merit in Arjun Ranatunga saying that clashes with the pro-Rajpaksha protesters, when the pro and the anti-protesters clashed, that led to the situation spiraling out of control? Is there merit in some arguing that Sri Lanka is actually on the brink of civil war?
So I absolutely agree with Arjuna, and I think the people have reacted in self-defense. If I may set the scene for you, Temple Trees has a large hall, like a wedding hall, where you can fit almost 5,000 people in it. And the Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa filled up that hall, bussed in people, and assembled a small army. And these people were incited by Namal Rajapaksa, by Johnston Fernando, and they marched to where the peaceful protesters are. And my friend Prasad was with the protesters. He said first the tear gas came in, like air cover, and then this Mahinda's army came in and started assaulting people. And then people reacted in self-defense. And if you look at what was attacked, it was the people who organized these buses. It was the people who organized these attacks on the peaceful people of Sri Lanka who are demanding resolution to our problems, through our democratic rights to go on the streets. Now, when you talk about civil war, I disagree with that, because the people are remarkably united at this time. It is us against the ruling class and a small group of corrupt people and one corrupt family. So it's not a setting for civil war. This is just one group of people, a very small group of people of the ruling class against the people. And we have withdrawn our consent to be ruled by them.
Okay. Withdrawn consent to be ruled by them. Does that mean, Ishwaran Ratnam, that the protesters are not satisfied just with the resignation of Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, and it was rather dramatic that he had to be rescued, he and his family had to be flown out of the Prime Minister's residence in a military chopper, taken to a naval base? Will they stay put there? There are some reports that seem to indicate that they may have to leave. Is this a single point demand now, demanding the resignation even of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa?
Of course. I mean, this whole protest commenced with the demand for the president to step down. The Prime Minister's name was later pulled into the whole scenario, but it all started with, the whole slogan was "Go home, go town." Everybody wanted the president out first. They of course wanted all the Rajapakshas out as well, but the whole process started with, protesters demanding that the president resign, and that an entire cabinet, a new cabinet be appointed as well, and that they wanted a system change. But nobody's going to be satisfied with just the Prime Minister stepping down. And I think a lot of people right now have shown through some of their actions on the streets as well that they want all the Rajapakshas out of Sri Lankan politics, because they feel that they have ruined the country over the last few years and they need to see some change.
Okay. But with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa appealing for peace and calm, clearly, will this have any impact on protesters? Is the national government that he seeks, the opposition has rejected it so far, but is behind the scene any conversation happening on a national government? Is that possible, or is that not possible at all? Mr. Indrajit Samarajiva.
Look, every person in Sri Lanka, including small children, know the phrase "Gota, go home." It's not especially complicated. The phrase is not "Gota, form a national government," or "Gota, hang around any longer." So it is a quite simple demand. You can see what the problems we're having. Look, the fish rots from the head. We have to change leadership if we're going to change direction. So no, there is no working with Gota at this point. And everything he's talking about peace and so on, these are lies. He's inciting these things. He's pushing in different ways. He's the ones telling the troops to shoot on sight. He's not de-escalating this in any way. And like I said, if you look around the country, we are not going in the right direction. We have to change leadership. And everyone from small children to old people waiting in queues for cooking gas, everyone understands this. So it's only this one man who needs to understand the very simple slogan, Gota, go home.
And should he not go home, what next then, Ishwaran Ratnam? What's the next course of action?
Well, if he doesn't go home, I don't think this crisis is going to get resolved. I mean, like India said, it's the president who has given the orders to shoot on sight with the situation going out of hand. Of course, there are various other elements seemingly at play here as well with some of these protests, some of the mob attacks that are taking place in Colombo and outside. But, you know, only he right now can resolve this by stepping down so that at least the major part of the whole issue is addressed here by he moving out. His brother has also moved out. If the Rajapaksa has also stepped down, then, you know, there can be a better system in place. Somebody else can take over, you know, and there can be an all-party government. I mean, the main opposition is not going to be part of this administration as long as the president is there. And they've made that very clear. So then you're not going to have an all-party government. You might just have a few members from the ruling party eventually forming another cabinet, and that is not going to be accepted by the protesters on the street.
Okay, because the Attorney General today has asked the police chief to investigate the clashes between the pro and the anti-government protesters. Now, given the current situation, given what the people on ground are talking about the president and the family or the Rajapaksa family, is an impartial investigation even possible with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the helm of affairs, Mr. Samarajiva?
Look, that's like asking a gun to investigate the bullet. So no, nobody takes these investigations seriously. I mean, they can pull up a mirror. I don't think they need a committee for anything.
Okay, so you're saying an investigation is not possible. The way out of this political crisis, Mr. Ratnam, you're saying is for the president to step down. But should he choose not to step down, with the army saying there's shoot-at-sight orders, does this mean that this chaos, this crisis remains, or the situation continues to deteriorate, go from bad to worse?
I think so. I think this situation will go from bad to worse, and I think countries like India and others who are now, you know, involved in this whole process of trying to help Sri Lanka come out of the economic crisis need to maybe start putting some sort of conditions. I mean, I know it's a hard task right now, and it would affect a lot of people, but you know, you need to get tough sometimes to send a clear message. And maybe now it's time that, you know, India especially starts you know, putting more pressure on Sri Lanka to ensure there's political stability before it, you know, steps in with financial support or other forms of assistance. I mean, of course, the assistance needs to go to the people, and we can't let the people suffer. But people are suffering anyway with all that's happening right now. This is just, you know, affecting a lot of people. It's just escalating the already the crisis that we're already facing. So, you know, something drastic needs to be done.
We will continue to track developments on the story very closely. I have run out of time on this part of the show. For joining me here on this India Today special, gentlemen, many thanks. Santoor player and legendary music composer Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma passed away at the age of 84. Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma was the recipient of the prestigious Padma Vibhushan. He'd earlier also got a Padma Shri. Tributes poured in from across the country. I leave you with these images of the Santoor maestro.